Welcome to United We Rise at USCHA. United We Rise, where we ask the question, what would the response to HIV look like if led by Black people? I am Kamaria Laffrey, living with HIV, Black Girl Magic, and chronic optimism. I serve as a member of the planning committee for United We Rise. Thank you for joining us today. In our time together, you will hear about United We Rise and our work that we've done over the past year and a half. You will meet with other members of the planning committee and have an opportunity to work with us as we think critically through our goals of United We Rise. I am excited about United We Rise and you joining us today with amazing leaders as we talk about our response to HIV, and we talk about it through the lens of excellence, and we amplify our voices in the response to HIV, the way we see it and the way we need it. We are excited for you to join us today in answering the question, what does the response to HIV look like if led by Black people? We want you to feel engaged and be a part of the solution. So today we'll be thinking about our future and the next steps in 2022.
As leaders in the HIV world, how are we extending what we have learned, right? In getting beyond some of those things in our little, like I said, our HIV bubble. How are we extending that to our general community, that beyond HIV, we're still playing these things out? And that at some point, there is no difference between a human being who is not living with HIV in their body and a human being who is living with HIV in their body, because all those other intersections and those circumstances and those conditions in our own families, in our own communities, in our own churches, in our own neighborhoods are some of those damaging impacts and effects. I'm just wondering, how are we extending that outside of our HIV bubble?
We have been in the HIV epidemic for about 35 years, 37 years, and we find ourselves in a place where we're making advances in many populations, in many communities, but the Black community is still bearing the brunt of the epidemic, and particularly certain populations like Black gay men and Black women have the highest proportion among women as well. And so we need to figure out a way to stop that, frankly. And the only way we're going to do that is for us to come together, to convene, and to talk about why it is that we aren't making some of the same advances as other folks. What are the systemic problems? What are the internal problems? How are we communicating with each other? How do we use our history and our love for ourselves, for Black people, to build the movement that can get us beyond this epidemic?
Every Black body really became a mantra for us, and we decided to take the opportunity to unpack what we mean by every Black body. And we spent a lot of time around this, right? And making sure that every Black body, our understanding of every Black body was grounded in some of our values around social justice, some of our values around intersectionality, and some of our values around Blackness. So as you see on the screen, we define every Black body as honoring the history and diversity of the Black diaspora, right? And so making sure that when we say every Black body, we mean people from different Black ethnic backgrounds, from different countries, Black people who hold different cultural understandings and experiences. Every Black body embodies collective liberation from systems that do not value us, and the internal struggles that they engender. So we know that, liberation is not only about us as individuals, but it's also about our collective, right? And making sure that when we talk about liberation, we're not only talking about liberation for all these systems, but also liberations for the ways in which as Black people, we might at times harm each other. Every Black body values the various ways individual experiences of Black people are both unique and intersected, right? We have a collective story as Black people. And because of our different ways in which we grew up, where we're from, our different ways in which we interacted with systems, we are unique as individuals. And so we want to acknowledge that and hold that up and celebrate that uniqueness and not see it as a point of division. Every Black body is a coalition effort dedicated to the well-being of people living with HIV and to the improvement of the physical and mental health of all our communities. So we are a coalition. We are doing the work to move forward together. And we want to make sure that we are centering the voices and the experiences of Black people living with HIV. And not only do we want to impact HIV, right? We also want to make sure that our work uplifts the physical and mental health of our community in general. We went through, as part of sort of this first year of our work, we also focused a lot on engaging the community nationally on what should be our areas of focus. And so as you see here, there are 5 areas that we focus on: sexual and gender identity, policy, Black leadership and organizations, Black community engagement, and intersectionality. And we do have definitions for all of these. You can see it on our website. But these are really the areas in which we have defined in order for us to end HIV for every Black body. We need to make sure that we are intentional on focusing and doing work within these 5 areas.
When I came into this field, roughly about 20 years ago, I entered the field when Black leadership was prominent. I mean, there was Black gay men everywhere, Black gay men organizations. There were people that I knew who led this fight, who looked like the fight. I mean, we were all in it together. But as time went on and as they started changing methods and approaches to HIV, Black folks got pushed out. It became obvious that our organizations weren't a part of it. You didn't see as many Black-led organizations or Black gay men-led organizations. And so I think that I commend the people who created this initiative or who led this initiative to say that we have to become a part of this again, because we have been pushed out. And it was an obvious push out, in my eyes. I went to a meeting, it had to be 2009, and I hadn't been in HIV for like a couple of years. And when I got to the meeting, it was a CDC meeting, and I was sitting there and they were talking about just different things, but none of the language that they were using sounded like community-based language. Also, I noticed that the people who I worked with for years, they weren't in the room. There were hospitals and there were clinics and they were talking about medical models. And all of a sudden, I realized that it had changed and we were not a part of the change, but yet we're still being impacted by HIV. And as we've learned over the years, that if we're not a part of our own fight, then we'll get left behind. It'll change, it'll shift away from our needs and it'll go to someone else. So our leadership is so pinnacle and important to this because the disease is impacting our lives. It's impacting the things that happen to us. And so us coming back into this fight was a fight. We actually have to knock the doors down and say that Black organizations, Black gay men organizations, Black-led organizations, Black trans organizations, we have to be a part of this, Black women organizations. So it is what we are and what needs to happen. And I'm gracious and just happy that I'm a part of this.
What I don't see in current media or in media that is based in right now is characters living full lives who also are living with HIV. What I don't see is characters who are taking PrEP. What you rarely see are characters who are intentionally using condoms. And so what we can now do, especially with organizations who have the opportunity, who may have grant funding, or who have, other ways to kind of produce content with what's available to us on YouTube and streaming and IGTV and Facebook Live and all these things. I think it's really important to start developing content, and not just conversations. Like, the conversations are great, right? But what happens when we start developing content where you're able to see these people who are living with HIV also living full lives, or where you're able to see people who are out and about and living their lives and like sex positive, also taking PrEP, also using condoms. Like, it's about really, especially within the Black community, taking off that veil of, don't have sex before marriage.
Right.
Because the thing is, people are having sex before marriage. And if people are having sex before marriage and we want to just keep ignoring it, then what we're eventually doing is allowing this virus to continuously ravage through our community. But what we can do on the other side of it is start creating examples of people, like examples throughout media. Because though that's what we all watch TV. We all watch movies. And there are so many of us who like want a pair of Manolo Blahniks because Carrie wore them, or want, a Telfar bag because Issa carried one all season on Insecure, or go to certain places to eat, or visit certain places for vacation, and blah, blah. So we are picking up social cues on how to shape our lives based off of what we see in TV and film. And so a part of that is seeing life. It's seeing vibrance. It's seeing safe sex practices. It's seeing people who are living with HIV, but who are still alive and thriving. And I think it's important for organizations who have a way of impacting media to start stepping into that space. And even if it's not, on HBO Max, if it's in your way, if it's in your voice, if it's in a way that impacts the community that you serve, then it's doing its job. It's what Moby did with Moby Talks, and with the digital series that you all released this summer. It was creating pieces that spoke to people who you may not necessarily hear from all the time, whose lives you may not see all the time in your favorite highly rated TV show, but it's creating media and trusting the organic nature and the truth telling of that media to do the legwork for you.
HIV policy has greatly impacted and shaped the HIV epidemic since HIV first appeared to us in the 80s and into the 90s. And HIV policy has shaped things as not simple, but things like, can people who are living with HIV, especially like young people, go to schools? If you think about Ryan White, for example, currently HIV policy shapes what resources look like. Hundreds of millions of dollars that we've seen an increase in funding for HIV in the past few years, and where that money goes, what is it for, who can use it, how can you use it? And so policy is really, an HIV policy is really about the systems and the resources and the power that inform how we can or cannot end HIV.
What actually drives HIV is animated by a lot of things that may not have anything to do with HIV, right? It's about housing policy. It's about education policy. It's about health policy writ large.
It's a way to hold our government officials, both elected and appointed, accountable. Did you achieve this policy? Are you carrying out the policy? Is it having the intended effect? So it's a measure of how we can hold our public officials accountable.
It actually infuriates me when people try to limit the funding that goes to systems that help. Because systems that harm have blank checks. We have seen this specifically on display for the past 4 years, but even before that, the military, criminalization, incarceration, these systems get unlimited funds, blank checks. And then when we talk about systems that help us, when we talk about our healthcare, when we talk about the things that we need, all of a sudden there is like a limitation on the imagination and the amount of money that is there for that. And so anytime I'm in a room, I want to disrupt that. People who are thought of second or last are the people who are the first ones to go in concessions. And so if we're not solving with those folks at the center, in collaboration with those people, then we're not going to do anything that is transformative or will actually have any impact on people's material conditions.
One way to think about intersectionality is all of the ways and all of the things that a person would describe themselves. I am now, I guess I am considered an elder. And as a trans woman, as a trans person, as a Black woman, as a woman, we know that ageism is part of it. And an elder is one of those things I used to describe myself. I'm 50 years old. I'm 50. And there was a time when you didn't see trans women living to 50. And unfortunately, there are not enough of us that make it to 50 now. I am a Black woman. I describe myself as Black and as a woman and a woman of a certain age and gainfully employed, relatively intelligent, and kind of cute, if I might add.
Yes!
Those things are part of my identity. They're part of what makes me.
People love to talk about intersectional issues, and they just grab issues and just plunk them together. And instead of talking about cross movement, somehow they got that confused. And it's just like, if we're talking about 4 things at this conference at the same time, we're intersectional. It's like, no, that's actually not what that means. And it's important that we continue to point that out, because that's the only way that we're going to get to the issues that involve us. That's how we get marginalized out of these conversations, because it becomes just what you can talk about versus what you're willing to fight.
There's this fake narrative of white, male, cisgender, heterosexual, patriarchal image of perfection. And as a Black transgender woman of a certain age who lives in the South, that's a lot of commas, and that's a lot of things that isn't that fake narrative. And so for myself, for folks like me, for you, and for our sisters, and even our trans brothers and our trans siblings and non-binary siblings and community, we are further away from that fake archetype. And so the systems that we all have to navigate, they weren't created for us. They were actually created against us.
It's about community ownership. It's not like just bringing people to the table. The table is yours. Now do what you want to with it. Turn it over if you have to. Start over and build a new table. It's not about bringing people to the table. It's not about engagement. It's about community ownership.
It's easy to get into that mode. And I think that happens even within, in all spaces of Blackness, even within multi-generational African Americans. We get this sort of like, oh, too bad for those people. And I think that is a piece, right? That's a part of the toxic piece. This fear is part of the toxic piece, because that fear leads to a willingness to join in the dehumanization that white supremacy calls for us to engage in. So it becomes easy to now, act this in ways that are toxic with respect to other people and to separate ourselves, because we already are primed for it. By, it's like the curl activator for what white supremacy already has out there for us. On the other side, having these conversations and holding up as a core value the respect for human dignity, right? So that there are situations that you might not understand. Okay, you don't understand why people are saying that their gender pronoun is they. You don't understand it. We can engage in the education around that. But even if you don't understand it, in that moment that you don't understand, do you respect the human dignity of that person? Yes? Well, their gender identity is they. Move forward.
It's so many people who can't even say sex, who are scared to say vagina, who's scared to say penis, who are still going at the doctors and walking around talking to friends, and it's like, my little chula, my little pocketbooks, and it's like, can we just say penis? Can we say dick? Can we say it? Like, we have it, but why aren't we? So, and that's causing harmful behavior when we go out into society and we see something that makes us uneasy, and instead of embracing the things that make us uncomfortable, we lash out, and it's harmful. So you have people who are beating people up, people who are murdering people, but then it's also stopping who we are as our people, because we're thinking of those stigmas and afraid to even express who we are as our people.
United We Rise is a collective effort to respond to the HIV epidemic in Black communities. Specifically, we want to answer the question, what would the response to HIV look like if it were led by Black people? And that question guides all of the efforts and the work that we do at United We Rise. So on a regular basis, what United We Rise looks like is having intentional conversations about how we build this movement together. One of the areas that we know is a growing space for us is trying to figure out how we better engage people in the HIV movement who don't already work in medicine or public health spaces. And so a lot of our conversations are about how do we bring in different voices, new voices, dynamic voices that haven't always been represented at the tables in HIV decision-making, and to make sure that we make room for all of the people that are potentially, vulnerable to HIV, particularly people who are living with HIV, and to make sure that those are the folks that are leading this Black-led response.
United We Rise has worked very hard to really be intentional on thinking about how we want to move forward and really create a Black-led response to the HIV/AIDS pandemic here in the U.S. And that response is not only to address what's happening in Black communities, but what we do know is that once we have a response to HIV that is intersectional and holds certain values, then we know that we'll not only support what needs to happen in Black communities, but support what needs to happen in all impacted communities.
We all have to just debunk from everything that we have been taught societally and traditionally. Not lose it, but understand that there is more. Open our minds to realizing that we have to see the foundation as being human and not sexual.
Black blood be a sopping river. Be Mississippi hues flooding the veins. Be veins flaying the family willow. Got you looking like your daddy and his daddy Nim's people. And then who before that, Black blood roll wide like waters. Be thicker than molasses, candied like sugar cane, sweet like Abel. Be sinning like a saint do. For knowing what the sun know, for leaking how the night leaks. Black blood drip dark and still gleam north like a star. Be shipped in and weighed in the wake still. Black blood be Atlantic, Atlantis, and Atlas, constellation of maps, masking as braids. Black blood be locked in and twisted in, be Bantu knotted like fists, be jailed and knocked, be knockers and barrettes beating a high top fade behind the school's bleachers. Black blood be Black child. Black blood be Black child running through pipelines, inlines, Dixon lines. Black blood lined with spirit. Black blood sprint like spirit over the Ohio Creek. Black blood cross. Black blood be crossed over, be cross burned. Black blood fire. Black blood on fire. Black blood forging a frown. Mad at the other for being woman. Scared at the other for being gay. For being trans. Fat like a drum. Too tar baby and still not tar baby enough. Black blood be hunted. Haunted, got a ghost gunning for re-election, be a bullet point on a ballot, be the bullet of the ballot. Black blood be the bullet's first love. Black blood run. Black blood be the first to run the show, be the first to run dry. Black blood be the first to bury. Black blood be the first to back. Black blood be mattering, be rippling an ocean wave, river, Nile. Black blood be spine bone unbit, be chiseled like Chisholm, oral like Arisha, dressed the color of lemonade, be scenting like sunset, be sundress on brown skin, be all right. Black blood be we gon' be all right. Black blood be Black. Black blood be back. Black blood coming back. Black blood be we gon' get free.